So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate the hierarchical cluster methodology and its application in the SPSS platform. Now, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with clustering methodologies, when they're appropriate and why we would apply them, and why we would be using the hierarchical cluster as it relates to the other cluster applications which are also available. So I'll try to go as slowly as possible as we can here through this particular process because it is a bit complicated, and I hope that you're able to follow along. As always, code related to this video's exercises and associated data files can be found within the video description below in CSV format. So if you wanted to, you can either pause the video and input these values at home, or you could get the data from the video description in CSV format and import it into your SPSS. So let us begin with the hierarchical cluster application. So we have our data here. And to begin, we're going to go to Analyze. Then we're going to select Classify. Then we're going to select Hierarchical Cluster. We now need to specify the variables which we're interested in. So we're interested in cont_var1, cont_var2, and cont_var3. Now here is where it begins to get a bit tricky. We have to play around with some of the options and submenus in order to get the output that we desire. So we're going to begin by checking statistics, making sure that this box is checked here and that nothing else is checked. If that is the case, we're going to click Continue. Next, we're going to select Plots. We want to be sure that Dendrogram is checked. Now, as it relates to the icicle, we want to be sure that none is selected. And then we want to click Continue. Now we have to select Method. And we want to be sure that this is set to squared Euclidean distance. We want to be sure that this is at between groups linkage, okay? For transform value standardized, we want to change this to range -1 to 1. We want to be sure that by variable is checked, and then we want to click OK, or click Continue. Continue. Then we want to click Save, and we want to make sure that everything here is appropriate. And so far, this looks good. The single solutions outputs a column to the original data set that contains cluster membership of each observation based on the number of clusters specified by the user. And range of solutions outputs multiple columns which contain cluster membership for each specified cluster selection. So at this point, we don't need to mess around with any of this. So we're just going to click Continue. And then once we've gone through all of these submenus, we're going to click OK. And our output window should produce something that resembles what we have here. Now, what we're most interested in is the graphic right here, the dendrogram. And those of you who are familiar with the concept know what's going on here. We have different clusters and we have a hierarchy which has been established therein. Now, when we take a look at the dendrogram, we can perhaps decide as to how many clusters we'd like to have. So we allowed the system to proceed with the default that we had selected and some of the submenu options, but maybe we look at the dendrogram and we decide that instead of having the clusters as they currently are assigned, maybe we'd like to instead do 5 clusters. Well, why 5 clusters? Well, I've printed out the reasoning in this particular diagram that I've created. So we could cluster here. So we have 5 clusters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe these 5 clusters are the only clusters that we're interested in. Maybe we don't want subsequent clusters. Maybe we're only interested in these particular 5. So if that's the case, we can then specify the single solution of clusters that we're interested in. So let's go back and let's repeat the process again. So we could either go through the menu that we went through earlier, analyze and so on and so forth, or to save time, we could click here. And from here, we can see the prior functions which we've applied, the most recent being the hierarchical cluster analysis. We can give that a click. And everything that we had just utilized, all of the options, etc., are still pre-populated. In this instance, we're going to select Save. We're going to select Single Solution, and we're going to specify the number of clusters. Remember, we're interested in only 5 clusters. So we're going to put 5 here, and then we're going to click Continue. Then we're going to click OK. And now when we look at our dendrogram, we can see that it's been modified to our liking. Let me get that full screen here. And we've also saved which cluster each variable row belongs to in this new variable generated here. So we can sort by cluster if we like, sort ascending perhaps. And we can see that values as it relates to row 1 to 14 are located in cluster 1, 15 to 19 are in cluster 2, 20 to 30 are in cluster 3, cluster 4 only contains the value of row 31, and these particular variable observation rows are found in cluster 5. So I hope that this was helpful, even though albeit a bit complicated, and that's where we're going to end. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any questions, maybe leave a comment so we can help one another out. We're trying to get the message out to as many users as possible, so best of luck in your research. Thanks for stopping by, and until next time, take care.